Hi all, our notable game today is quite topical. The London Chess Classic is underway. The event this year is actually combined with Norway Chess and the Singfield Cup tournaments, and it will determine the winner of the Grand Chess Tour 2015. So the stakes have been raised for this London Classic this year, and even the world champion is playing in it, many of the top players in the world. This game I'd like to show you from round 1. Veselin Topalov 2803 is playing against Anish Giri 2778. He kicks off with d4. Giri plays knight f6. We enter into c4 g6. Here, this is a kind of Fianchetto-Grunfeld system. It's described like that anyway, by opening classification. So bishop g2, d5. Here, now, very odd looking move. Usually c takes or knight f3 is played. Maybe this next move was designed to take the game away from extremely theoretical territory. There's been 50 games in live book with this move. Queen a4 here instead of c takes or knight f3. So the game continues. Again, rather quirkily, knight fd7 instead of ordinarily bishop g7 is possible and has been played before as well. But knight fd7 looks strange. The knight can use b6 to kick the queen. Black doesn't mind at all if white tries to stop that, because that will make e5 even better later if the centre's closed like that. So we have c takes d5 here, knight b6, queen going back all the way to d1. And black keeps a pawn in the centre here. If he takes with a knight, then maybe e4 later would be useful. So, interesting position, knight c3, knight c6, e3 locking in white's own bishop. So this bishop might be either on b2 later or a3, one would expect. Bishop g7, knight ge2. Here, it looks as though, unlike a lot of Grunfeld variations, black hasn't got the c5 break. He can, however, play for an e5 break, but it will be at some cost. Positioning. If black ever plays for e5 later, then d5 will be an isolated queen's pawn. Both sides castle, but it seems with this next move now, Giri is not afraid to try and play for the e5 break, even though it is kind of double-edged. By playing for e5, yes, he's liberating his pieces a bit more, making them more aggressive, but if white ever takes, he's going to get the dreaded, potentially dreaded, isolated queen's pawn. Now Topalov plays b3, saying, I don't really care about e5. And it is actually played, so we're set for an aggressive game now after this e5. It might have been possible to, not play this, maybe bishop g4, just keep the pawn structure more stable. But it's played, and we have d takes and knight takes e5. So, with this knight on b6, it looks rather awkward as well. The b3 seems well designed against this knight. So white technically would seem slightly better here, in fact. Although black's bishops are quite good. This one on the diagonal and this one is threatening things like bishop g4 immediately and knight f3. And white stops that idea actually with h3. Of course, it's a theoretical weakening of the king position. You might ask a blunt question instead of h3. Could white have taken on d5 here? Knight takes d5. Is that really on the cards? Not really, because this diagonal is very, very sensitive. A loose rook on a1. Say knight takes, bishop takes, or queen takes. Let's look at queen takes first. This variation with bishop h3 is really good for black, because black is going to throw in knight f3 check and win that rook on a1, winning at least the exchange, or even more. Bishop takes f1. So that's like the exchange up for black. And bishop takes instead of queen takes. So bishop takes, there's bishop g4. Threatening bishop takes e2 and queen takes d5. So this position is just winning for black. So yeah, it's too dangerous for white to take on d5. That should be understood. So h3 was played. So it's isolated but not able to be munched just yet, not safely. Bishop f5, and again it's offered here. And similar ideas. Let's have a look. White plays the blockading move knight d4. If he takes on d5, knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes. Black here just plays bishop takes h3, hitting the rook, and again threatening things like knight f3. So even bishop g2, knight f3 check, and we're winning that rook. Or taking on f1 here, winning the exchange. Okay, so the blockading move looks very logical, knight d4. But black's idea is to use this d3 square, which he's got temporary piece coordination on. So that bishop is not humbly going backwards here. It's going into white's position for a moment. Bishop d3, hitting the rook. And then going to this diagonal, bishop a6. So it seems, yes, maybe Giri has got a specific idea in mind with the isolated queen spawn to get a knight on d3. Very aggressive stuff, especially for this poor bishop. Maybe it had wanted to go to b2, but knight d3 is an imminent incoming threat. We see queen d2, and the knight goes in to d3 here now, in any case, and hitting the rook, rook d1. And yeah, if white gets in bishop a3, is white looking forward to being quite comfortable? Well, yes, maybe, because the knight couldn't then capture anything, and bishop f1 will pin against a6, well, cause structural damage and stuff. So black, though, has again, it seems, prepared a very specific idea here, quite kind of counterintuitive, because this bishop, you don't normally want to get rid of it lightly because it's protecting the dark squares, but in fact, yes, Giri actually snaps off the knight on d4, which makes the frontal pressure on the d pawn less significant. Of course, it's blocked now by white's own pawn, so this pawn is more sheltered. But what about the king safety issue? We see now queen f6, and the idea is hitting d4 now. So in fact, it's white's queen pawn, new queen pawn, on d4, which is a target, it seems. Here, this is uncomfortable. It's impossible to defend like this, surely, because of things like rook takes and then knight takes. You know, white's got control on these squares, a lot of pressure on these squares. So how to defend this? What actually happens here? A very, very clever idea now from Veselin Topalov, in fact, to counter this. He uses the d pawn as a kind of positional sacrifice. He plays a4, and this guarantees a tempo gain of a5. This knight is still restricted by the pawn on b3, and we see now after queen takes d4, a5, knight d7, there's a new resource in the position the a pawn has created. Can you see what white plays here? Very clever stuff from both sides. White play, what does Veselin Topalov play here? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay, rook a4, yes, that's the idea. And the rook might be dangerously swinging over to try and exploit maybe the dark squares. We see queen e5. And it's in this position, the d5 pawn now is taken. Knight takes d5. Now, before this bishop ever goes onto this diagonal, any thoughts of that are taken away completely. Knight takes c1. Rook takes c1. Now, there might be an idea of rook e4 here for white in this position. And the e4 square is actually covered now with knight f6. Just as an example of that, why is that significant? Let's say black didn't cover the e4 square and played rook ad8. Rook e4 is actually quite good here because of this, and we see actually things like knight c7 forking It's pretty dangerous. This bishop's very nice here, and this bishop's kind of awkward as a target on a6 in this formation. So, okay, knight f6 covers rook e4 and brings challenge to that nicely centralized knight as well, of course. Logical, but it does go to c7. Okay, a forcing move from black though, rook ad8, queen f4. And now a very, very clever looking move indeed from Anish Giri, which is kind of counterintuitive. It's not the first sort of move you'd think of. Again, if I give you 5 seconds here, what does black play in this position? So 5 seconds starting from now. Very clever, resourceful move. Okay, g5, yes. Asking the queen to take on e5 to relieve this fork a bit and give black maybe access. His rooks are going to come down to maybe d2 and e2 after. If the ordinary rook e7 had been played, then white could snap off e5, take on a6 and play rook c6, forking a6 and f6. This is very pleasant for white indeed. So we see g5, yes, it seems to be a very useful forcing move. White avoids the exchange of queens, but maybe he should have, Topalov should have given serious consideration to taking on e5 here. For example, you know, this isn't so bad with rook a1 here with the threat of rook c6. For example, like this, taking here. This looks like a very pleasant position for white. You might wonder, I mean, if rook c6, then black gets that first rank check in. So rook a1 first would keep that threat there. So that seems a promising idea. But anyway, queen b4, after this g5, queen b4 was played. And now queen b2, asking the rook to move. The rook on a comes down to that defense. So both rooks are protecting each other. Rook e2, a bit of coordination though against f2. Queen c5, protecting, not only protecting f2, but hitting g5. So that's protected. So that's one symptom of these weaknesses. But now knight takes a6, and it seems, hold on a sec. B takes. Isn't this pawn hanging here? White could afford to take this and still protect f2. Isn't that possible? White plays actually rook ab1, but actually it does seem, from brief engine checking, this might have been possible. This grab of a pawn here, for example, like this, bishop f1, yeah, bishop c4, and actually the queen's not so bad, attacking and defending on a7. Not a bad position at all for white. So maybe that's something to investigate as an alternative to what was played, which is this queen d2, because now the queen is actually being usefully kicked into a place where it's hitting a5. It's ready to exchange off for 2 rooks here on rook d1. That'd be fine. But also now, if queen takes a7, this is an upgrade for black. For queen takes a5 on the previous line looked at. So here, this is too dangerous as well, because there's an infiltration into the first rank. This position starts to get too dangerous for white. The pieces are just too far away from the king, as this shows. White's going to get really badly attacked. So the safe opportunity for taking on a7 seems to be discarded there. When white actually played rook ab1 now, instead of taking on a7. So we have queen d2, which looks at a5. Bishop f3, trying to ask the rook to move. But this apparent forcing move, and this is definitely something to bear in mind in your own games if you play it over the board, etc., that sometimes the positional exchange sacrifice concept is very, very handy. And or counter-attacking, or seeing, you know, is your opponent really in a position to make threats? Can you do counter threats? You don't always have to directly be answerable to a threat, be pushed around too much. So a very key important move now is played by black. What do you want to do here after bishop f3? What would you play here with black after bishop f3, hitting your rook? If I give you 5 seconds here, can you find Anish Giri's move? So 5 seconds to pause the video starting from now. Okay, counter-attack on the queen. And we have 3 pieces now coordinating on f2. Now here, perhaps best is, safest would seem bishop takes e4. Just snap this knight off. Queen f5, which hits the rook and guards f2, and also looks at f7, countering, defending and attacking at the same time. Seems a useful option in this scenario. Say queen d5, then white's fine. This is a fine position for white. This is not possible, for example. This is not possible. This position is stable for white because there's enough counter pressure to stop things like rook e1. Now I'm giving rook e1 as a bad example now of what black shouldn't do here, because white could take and then play check, mating black on h8. So that's why this variation of bishop takes e4 has got something going for it, it seems. That with this forcing move and queen f5, protecting f7 and defending f2 has a nice symmetry about it for attack and defense, and it seems fine for white. So this is a line which seems stable enough. But anyway, in the game we see actually queen takes a7, and yes, the rook would seem trapped. The rook's trapped. No moving away. Isn't the rook trapped? Because if rook takes, then bishop takes e4, defends g2, and what does black do here? This is horrible. And on knight takes, okay. Well, in the game, what does black do? Yeah, black actually, I think I might have given the game away. What would you play here with black? He hasn't got too many options if it's not rook takes f2, so I'll show you. Black played knight takes f2, an exchange sack. Yes, powerful exchange sack here. White's pieces are a little bit away from the king in this position. So we have bishop takes e2, knight takes h3, and maybe Topalov had seen this position and thought it was okay after king f1, otherwise why go into this? If he had gone to anywhere else, then it's so easy for black. Queen takes e2 check. Here, rook d2 threatens actually queen h5, mating. And for example, check here, there's no immediate follow-up check. So white's getting mated. Yes, the king's too awkward there, for example, like this. So obviously he's ruled out that. And you can also rule out king h1, queen takes e2, with the idea of rook d2 and queen f3 is pretty strong. So he goes to f1, thinking maybe this is safe. But there's a move here, a crushing blow found in this position, which is really awkward to meet with black's particular piece configuration here. Can you see what black plays in this position? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now, black to play. Okay, not rook e8, because then actually the queen might actually still be justified attacking f7 here with bishop c4. The queen's defending f2 and hitting f7. And here queen b6 now threatens queen g6, check, using the pin. Yeah, black's on the defensive, and white would be actually defending this position. No, black needs something stronger than rook e8. So here's another chance if you want to stop again for 5 seconds. It's a brilliant move. Only move, really. Queen d5. Threatens mate in 1. It's useful to threaten mate in 1. Now white plays bishop h5 to give his king e2. That e2 square is given, but check here, check. This is a king chase with the rooks in such an awkward place. They're like really not helping the king escape to these squares if they were needed. They're taken away. King e1, check. Not too many choices here. King d1. Now the knight comes in, knight f2 check. So we have 3 attacking pieces and kind of spectators, really, spectator pieces here. King c2. Is the king going to escape? It would love to go to a1. It's not given a chance. Knight e4 check. And white has to resign here. Believe it or not. It's getting mated. Just put on a Qb2 here to show you. It's actually a forced mate in 3. Assuming we don't want to play queen f2. King d3. Check. Here. Check. And it's going to be mate next move. Either queen c7 or queen c5, mate next move. Yeah. Shocker. And yeah, this is one of the more interesting games. Obviously, some mistakes, it seems, why Topalov crept in. First round nerves. Maybe he missed queen d5. But very tactical game. That knight e4 worked out very well. That counterattack knight e4 when the rook seemingly was trapped. So yeah, crushing final position. The knight, queen and rook working very well together here. So what do we get from this game? Well, it seems one thing is for sure. Giri is very open-minded to having an isolated queen's pawn. He energetically used d3. He was open-minded to losing his fianchet and bishop, which some people would never consider really, but it helped actually to give white a weakened d-pawn. Topalov, to his credit, played resourcefully with a4, a5, getting his rook into the game, and he had the advantage. He could have, at one point it seemed, safely taken on a7, but this tempo gaining was not too useful, putting the queen here on d2. Maybe he could have safely taken on a7, and maybe later he could have more safely just taken that knight, that pesky knight, for his queen to come to f5 to look at f7 and f2 from f5 instead of from a7. And it seems he could have reached a stable position. So some inaccuracies, it seems, from Topalov led to this horrible situation where his king was far too exposed and black's pieces coordinating fantastically well. So Giri was actually the only winner of round 1. So I think we can call it, looking at the excitement levels of the other games, in fact, I would call it game of the round for round 1, and I hope you got something from it. Open-mindedness to several concepts. I say queen's pawn, weakened kingside. The g5 was also a bit of a surprising move, some people might not think of. So energetic, resourceful play, yes, from Giri. On the risky side, yes, but you know, he hasn't actually lost that many games in the Grand Prix. He's quite a solid grandmaster overall. So some calculated risk taking, you could say. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.